glasses in it.
Is it very, very bad?
Yeah, they're in a case.
Okay.
And I don't think I need them for this, but I'll need them for the next service. Thank you.
Shannon, he's the president of Freed-Hardeman University. I'm pretty sure he started in the fall of 2017. Joel and Jacob are with us for about another hour, 2 hours later. I'll give a longer introduction to Brother Shannon at the worship hour. The two things that I look for in a preacher is number one, you love and respect Jesus Christ and His Word. And number two, you love people. And I think David Shannon fits both of those characteristics. I know that you will enjoy and appreciate and grow from the lessons that he will give today, this morning, and at the 11 o'clock hour. Let's begin with a brief prayer. Our Father in heaven, we are thankful that we can assemble together on this day to worship you through your Son. We're thankful, Father, for the blessings that we have through Christ, that we can come to you in prayer, that you answer our prayer. We're thankful, Father, for forgiveness of our sins and the purity and holiness that we have because of Christ. We're thankful, Father, for the ministry that David and his wife Tracy have given to you and to your church through the years, for the ministry he provides for these students at Freed-Hardeman and helping educate them to prepare them for life and for eternity. Bless us this morning as we go through our Bible study and our worship. Bless him as he breaks to us the bread of life. We pray, Father, that our spirits will be strengthened as we have worshiped you today. We offer this prayer, Father, in the name of Christ. Amen.
Good morning. It is so good to be at Swartz Creek this morning with you. We have looked forward to this for well over a year. First, we looked forward to being with you about a year ago before COVID became an issue around the globe. And we look forward to it for many reasons, but especially because you guys have such a strong relationship with Freed-Hardeman. And, it's when we plan our treks and travel, we travel often within a 4, 5, 6, 7 hour radius of Freed-Hardeman. And then at least once a semester, we try to go well beyond that. And so it didn't take us long when we were planning these, say, we need to make a run up to Swartz Creek. And so we've looked forward to this. We appreciate the relationship that we have with each other. Allow me to spend 5, 6, 7 minutes saying some things about Freed-Hardeman, and then we're going to go into a lesson out of the book of Proverbs. I bring you greetings from Freed-Hardeman University, and let me get this working right. There we go. Freed-Hardeman began in 1869. The 14 institutions associated with the Churches of Christ of higher education. We're the oldest one across America. And our mission is not just something that we put on a piece of paper. Our mission is something that we strive to fulfill every day. You can come onto campus and you can see these things being lived out. And we strive to help students develop their God-given talents for His glory. We do this by empowering them. We can't do it for the student, but we do this by empowering them with an education that integrates the Christian faith, scholarship, and service. And we're thankful every day to be able to be around some of the best young people across the nation. And that's true because they come from churches like this all across the nation. And they come from homes that have already instilled deep values within them. I had a father walk up to me just a few weeks ago. His son was a senior, was graduating, and he walked up and he said, "I want to thank you." He said, "My wife and I spent 18 years trying to instill faith and values into our son. And we dropped him off here 4 years ago. And all you guys did was you deepened that and you enriched his life. And now he's even a stronger man than when we dropped him off. And we want to thank you." I really mean it when I say we see what we do as a partnership with churches and parents. In that if you made a list of 5 things that are most important for you, if you were going to look at young people developing from teenagers to young adults, I would almost guarantee you, if you listed 5 things that's most important to you, it'd also be the 5 things that would be most important to us. I want to show you a few snow scenes, and you guys, that's nothing to y'all. Notice I said y'all. We're different, and we don't get snows like this. We actually had 2 snows. And usually when we get snow, within 24 hours it melts. And we had 2 snows that came within 1 week and they didn't melt. And so we had snow on the ground for a week. That's unheard of for us. That won't happen once every 10, 15 years that we'd have a week of snow on the ground. So you can imagine our Gano trays began to leave the cafeteria. We had to lock them up for a while. And we had a lot of sledding going on the trays out of the cafeteria. And it was really, really a great time back a few weeks ago. But really, even though we began this semester in the midst of COVID and this academic year in the midst of COVID, we still were richly blessed by God. We began in August, and we had an all-time high in enrollment at Freed-Hardeman University out of the 150 years. Here are just a few of the numbers that are record-setting numbers for us. That's a part of this academic year that we just completed last week. We had an all-time enrollment high of 2188, undergraduate 1727, dual enrollment of 346. Our graduation rate continues to set all-time highs because our retention rate sets all-time highs. You see how that works? If more and more students stay semester after semester, year after year, graduation rate climbs also. And so we're thankful that that's been happening. As a matter of fact, then coming into this semester that we just completed from the fall, we had a 95% retention rate, even in the midst of COVID, which was a blessing to be able to be together. I'm not going to read through these, but this is comparing this spring semester we just completed. Those 2 are highs and that we've experienced as an institution, and the other column is comparing what it was just a year previous to that. And so God is blessing Freed-Hardeman richly. We give him all the glory, and we're thankful for it. Let me pause for just a moment and tell you some other numbers that we're even more excited about. We survey students. It's part of our accreditation process. We survey students a year after they graduate. So most of the time at that point, we're surveying young people that are 23 years old. They've come to Freed-Hardeman as teenagers. They've left as young adults, and they're 23 years old. And we ask them questions about, did you find a job in your field of study? If so, how long did it take you? Did you get accepted into whatever school? And by the way, our acceptance into professional schools are almost 100%. You name almost any of the schools. There's a few that nobody across the country has 100%. For example, med school, the national average is probably in the 70s to be accepted in the med school. Ours is 91%. Veterinarian school across the country, the average is 60-something%. Ours is 91%. Our acceptance pharmacy is 99%, and most everything else is 100% acceptance rate. And so the reason we know that is we have to survey that, we have to prove that, and et cetera. But one of the questions that we ask is, are you going to church? 83% of our population on campus, 83% of our enrollment are members of the Church of Christ. And of those that come to us, members of the Church of Christ, a year after they graduate, 23 years of age, we say, do you still go to church? 98% say yes, and 92% say every time the doors are open. And we're thankful for that fact, and yet at the same time, that's what we hope and what we expect. Our goal is not for a young person to come to Freed-Hardeman, and while they're there, hopefully they will survive. Our goal is that they would come to Freed-Hardeman, and while they were there, their faith would deepen, their love for God would increase, and their opportunities to serve would be magnified over and over, so that when they leave, their experiences in service are much, much greater. Let me share with you some things about when I say that we are committed, of course, to the fact of 2 things: Christian education. I've shared several things with you for just a few moments there about Christian, but let me talk with you about education for a moment. We are thankful that if a young person that wants a Christian education does not have to sacrifice anything academically, but instead they can kind of have a head start and an advantage over other institutions that they could choose to attend. As I've already mentioned, the acceptance into med school or whatever, it's pretty awesome. I was talking to a young lady that wanted to go to a big, huge state school and said her dad was going to make her go there because that was her best route into med school. And I was like, but it's not. And I was like, statistically, probability, your odds of getting accepted in med school from Freed-Hardeman are much higher than that big state school. She couldn't believe it. And I said, well, just call and ask them what their acceptance rate is. And so she said, well, even if I did, Dad wouldn't believe it. I said, well, let your dad call. And so her dad called that big state school, and then he called Freed-Hardeman, and she was so excited. She said, we're going to come visit Freed-Hardeman. And she's in the medical field today. And so it's pretty neat. And let me give you a few other examples here. For example, in our nursing program, there are 51 higher education institutions across the state of Tennessee that graduate nursing graduates. And of that 51, Freed-Hardeman this past year was the only one out of 51. We're talking about, we have Belmont, Vanderbilt, University of Memphis, UT Knoxville, UT Chattanooga, UT Martin. We have all these schools. Freed-Hardeman was the only one this past year that had 100% pass rate on the first take of the NCLEX. And not only did we have that this year, and we're the only one offering it in the BSN in nursing, it's our second year to do that. And so when we say that we can offer an excellent academic experience, it's not just a feeling. We can back it up with numbers. Same thing in our College of Business, that it's really impressive what the graduates do. Our graduates in business take a field test at the end, just as they're graduating, that 500 other universities across America take. And our graduates finish in the top 93 percentile or above every year. And our graduates in accounting finish in the 99th percentile in the accounting portion of that test. And our graduates in finance finish in the top 99 percentile in the finance portion of that test. This is a team. This picture is a year old. This is our first bank investment team. We'll have 10 students that will be chosen and trained on how to invest. And this team at Freed-Hardeman invest a real $1 million every year. And there's only been 1 year out of the past 11 years that they have not outperformed other professionals. Our fund is compared to the Russell Index 1000 fund, and they outperform the professionals almost every year. You can imagine when they go to get a job, the advantage it is to be able to say that they've already been investing $1 million. They have no problem getting a job. As a matter of fact, their interviews, what they tell me, their interview is almost all about it, because the person interviewing them wants them to tell them how it worked that they invested that much money while they were a college student. And so just to give you an idea that it's not just us that thinks this, U.S. News and World Report, they rank every university across America every year. And so in the southern region, from Texas over to the coast, Kentucky down to Florida, Freed-Hardeman was ranked number 8th in the whole southern region out of all the regional universities. We were ranked number 8th in best value. That's where they measure academic performance, cost, and the need-based aid that is offered to students that have higher needs. And so we are thankful for that. We have a location in Dixon of another nursing department. We're in Memphis with a lot of grad work being done there. And then we have a facility in Belgium where students go there and they're able to see much of Europe the semester that they are there. This is a portion of our campus in Henderson. This is home to us, and you guys know that well. You send many students. You send excellent students that are part of Freed-Hardeman, and we're thankful. And so we invite you to come visit us. If you have never come for our lectureship, the first week in February is our lectureship, and I want to encourage you to take a few days of vacation time. It is probably the second largest gathering in the brotherhood every year in America. And there'll be, not counting the college students and all that's on campus on a regular basis, there'll be close to 3,000 brothers and sisters across the nation, really around the world, that will come to Henderson and spend time listening to hundreds of sessions. And just also, it's a great reunion. And so I want to encourage you take some vacation time, drive down south, spend a few days, it starts on Sunday and finishes up on Thursday night. We would love to have you with us. This was last year's topic. This coming year is going to be on the book of Luke. Come down sometime for Making Music. If you don't know what Making Music is, I don't have time to explain to you. It's crazy, but it's a lot of fun. And this is some pics from this year's Making Music. Congratulations, Zakai, winning it. You guys know about Horizons. You send a lot of young people to Horizons, and we're appreciative of that. This year, because of COVID, we have narrowed it just a little bit, so it'll be 7th through 12th grade. We've already filled up the slots. We fill up every year and have to turn folks away. So we're already full on the female side, I think, and there's only a few slots open on the male side. But thank you for sending young people to that. It's a wonderful spiritual experience for them. Mid-South Youth Camp meets 8 weeks, 1 week sections. And so if you're looking for a camp to come to, it is great. And kids come from all over America to it. And it's a wonderful Bible camp. And this is a new dining hall that is literally being finished this week and next week. It's about almost a $2 million project that is being complete. And it's just an amazing, these are some pictures that are a few weeks old when it was under construction, and we're thankful for the good that is happening there. Have you ever wondered why people don't like you? I'm not saying people don't really like you, but have you ever thought about, does God want Christians to not be liked? Does God want Christians to live in such a way that their kindness, their genuineness, their tenderness, their forgiveness is all attractive? If there are things that we do that cause people to not like us, do you think God would have given us a warning? Do you really believe the Bible is sufficient? Do you think the Bible is sufficient to live by? And if so, do you believe that it equips us just for day-to-day relationships? As we think about this, I'd like for you to think with me about the power of wisdom. And let me begin just a little bit on the lighter side, okay? I love the story of the little boy who was approaching a barber shop. And as the barber looked out the glass windows there of his shop, it's full of customers waiting and a guy sitting in his chair, and he sees a little boy approaching, and before the boy gets to the door, he says loudly to the shop, he says, guys, watch this. Dumbest kid in town's about to enter the door. You won't believe this. The little boy swings open the door, and he very nicely greets everyone, and he speaks to them. And as he's speaking to them, the barber reaches back in his cash drawer, and he pulls out a dollar bill in one hand and 2 quarters in the other hand. And he turns back and he says, son, which hand do you want today? And the boy looks at the dollar, and he looks at the 2 quarters, and he takes the 2 quarters and he says, thank you, sir. And he says goodbye to everyone, and he walks out the door, and the door slams, and the barber, he bellows out again. See, guys, I told you, dumbest kid in town. He walks in here every day and he picks 2 quarters over $1 every day. Well, one of the guys finished up his haircut and he was walking back toward town, and he saw the little boy licking on an ice cream cone. And curiosity got him. He walked over and he said, son, I've got to ask you, why do you pick the 2 quarters every day? And the little boy smiles. He takes another lick off of the cone and he says, mister, the day I take the dollar, the game's over. Isn't it amazing when you hear wisdom? It's kind of like a riddle. You know, sometimes when someone gives you a riddle, you're just kind of blank face. You're like, I don't understand. I can't figure it out. And then someone tells you the answer to the riddle, and it's like that light bulb moment of like, how did I miss that? That's amazing. Do you realize wisdom is somewhat like that? Do you realize on a daily basis, most people do not live a life based on wisdom? They don't see it. They don't know it. They don't understand it. If you think everybody sees, knows, or understands wisdom, you haven't read Proverbs 1 lately, have you? Because Proverbs 1 makes it very clear that wisdom has to be learned. And you even have to study Proverbs to be able to know how to understand Proverbs, according to Proverbs 1. James, the 3rd chapter, tells us that there's a wisdom that people see that's earthly, and they think that's wisdom. And he goes on to tell us that it's not wisdom at all. He even calls it demonic. But then he says there's a wisdom that is from above, and it is pure, and it's peaceful, and it is beautiful. You see, living a long life and learning from your experiences will never give you the wisdom from above. That kind of wisdom is only earthly. You can be a teenager and have wisdom from above. You can be in your 30s and 40s and have wisdom from above. It's just the source. One is you trying to figure out and navigating life, and the other is taking the time to humble ourselves and listen to God. I believe the entire Bible is full of wisdom. But isn't it amazing that out of the 66 books, God gives us one where in essence He is saying, I want to give you an entire book. It only has one purpose. It is to help you be wise. God knows the power of wisdom. According to Proverbs 8, He used wisdom to create the earth. Wisdom existed before the earth existed. Wisdom existed before Adam and Eve existed. There's this wisdom that is so magnificent, it's of God. And He gives us a whole book to say, you've got that potential. You can live a life that is so different than what you would otherwise live. In other words, here's your life without wisdom. Here's your life that would be totally different if you choose to live godly wisdom. Because of that powerful impact, I make a plea to you today. Don't let a day of your life go by from today forward without reading out of the book of Proverbs. Now continue reading all the other scriptures that you read on a daily basis, but make sure you carve out a few minutes every day to read out of Proverbs. What's neat is Proverbs has 31 chapters, so if you just said whatever day of the month it is, I'm going to read that chapter in Proverbs, it'll keep you on track where you're reading the book of Proverbs most months. And if you'll read it with a desire to learn and apply that godly wisdom to your life, I can assure you, if you haven't been doing that and you start doing that, you'll see a difference in your life within the first month or two. You will see how you do business differently. If you own your own business, you'll do it very differently after you truly start to understand Proverbs. You'll have family relationships that you will address differently if you live by Proverbs. You will have neighbors that are annoying that you will live with them differently after you start living Proverbs. You'll deal differently with your church family if you have never lived Proverbs before and you start living that wisdom. You and others will see a remarkable difference in your life. And so today is just a catchy angle to say, here's how we can just think about how would we approach relationships if we looked at it from a negative perspective. By the way, I've done up to 40 or 60 of these. You can go through Proverbs and probably create 100 reasons why people wouldn't like you. Also, I've turned around and done lessons on like 30 reasons people do like you out of the book of Proverbs. We're just looking at just a few. And by the way, we'll never get through 20 this morning. What we'll do is we'll go through 4 or 5, and then there'll be one particular one in a few minutes that we'll close with. But we'll scan through some of these 20. But let's look at some reasons maybe people don't like us. Number one, are you a loner? Notice how Proverbs, the 18th chapter and verse 1 says, a man who isolates himself seeks his own desire. He rages against all wise judgment. Now, notice this is not talking about someone who's simply an introvert. And someone says, well, how do you know? It's because he says it, right? Isn't it neat how so many Proverbs, by the way, they're given in 2 phrases. And so when we look at the first phrase of this proverb, he says very clearly why this person isolates himself. It has nothing to do with whether or not they're an introvert or an extrovert. The reason this person isolates, according to this proverb, this wisdom, is because of their selfishness. Notice he clearly says, a man who isolates himself seeks his own desire. So here's a person who is selfish. They want things their way. So what have they learned? They've learned in life that the more relationships you have, the more you have to give of yourself. Think about it. If you want a good relationship with your grandchildren, what do you have to do? You have to give some of yourself. You invest in that relationship with them. If you want a good relationship with your spouse, what do you have to do? You're selfish. Honey, what do you want? Where should we go? What do you need help with this weekend? You see, those are healthy questions that someone would ask that was not seeking their own desire. A church family. Announcements made. Saturday morning, the such and such family is going to be loading a moving truck and they could use your help. Who shows up? Selfish people don't show up. So-and-so is celebrating a 50th anniversary. Come join them from 2 to 4 at the church building Sunday afternoon. Who shows up? Unselfish people. You see, what selfish people learn is, if I don't give of myself to others, I get to do what I want all the time. So name your hobby. You love to golf. You love to cook. Whatever your hobby is. If I become selfish, I get to do it Thursday afternoon, all day Saturday, Sunday afternoon. But there'll be a couple in the congregation that randomly gets a call on a Thursday evening. Hey, my son's fallen and we're going to have to go to the emergency room. We think he's broken his arm. Can you keep our newborn and our 3-year-old while we're there? Now pause. Why did they call that couple? Out of all the couples, why did they call that couple? Because that couple has proven that they're not loners. They're not selfish. They're willing to give of themselves. Now, notice we says 2 phrases in most Proverbs. What's the second phrase? The person that wants to do what they want to do all the time, they isolate themselves. And someone says, oh, that's cool. That way your time is your time all the time. What a great life that would be. Well, this earthly wisdom, that'd be a great life. I get to do what I want to do. What about heavenly wisdom that we would never figure out on our own as humans? This is from above. What does heavenly wisdom say? Read the next part. He rages against all wise judgment. Notice how strong that is. What's a rage? Strong, fighting against what? Wisdom, wise judgment. And so if people don't like us, it could be they don't have a relationship with us because of our selfishness. Number 2, are you a bad listener? Proverbs, the 18th chapter, and verse 13 says, he who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and a shame to him. How hard is it for you to listen? Isn't it interesting the challenge it is to listen? Because oftentimes we think we know the right answer. We think we know what to say. We think we know how someone ought to think or feel. And so we just start telling them. You own a business. You want the respect of your employees and you want to do what's wise. Listen to them. You have a spouse. You want a healthy relationship. Listen to your spouse. You have children. You want the respect of your children. Instead of immediately punishing or immediately telling what you're going to do this weekend, what if you stopped and listened? Tell me what just happened. What was on your mind? Tell me what you'd like to do this weekend. You're an elder. You want the church to follow you because God commands it? Or what about if the church follows you not only because God commands it, but because they respect you so much because you listen to them? You know, through the years, I've been blessed to have opportunities to teach a lot of teenagers. And I've also had the opportunity to do a lot of parenting seminars. And so I was in El Salvador several years ago. And on that particular mission trip, we had the opportunity to go into a high school, public school, and and all of them wear uniforms, and even though they live in poverty, is amazing. They're blue uniforms with white shirts. We're so crisp and clean, and there's dust and dirt everywhere, and you're in this block room, and so I have a translator with me, and the teacher invited us to come in and to talk some from the Bible. They wanted to hear the Bible in public school. And then we had the opportunity to invite them to a teenage class that we had taking place that night where we would teach more Bible. And so that was the setting, but I just wanted to know. And before we got into the Bible study, I said, I've got a question I want to know. I said, how many of you feel like your parents maybe don't understand you and you just wish your parents would stop and listen to you? Because what I wanted to know, was this just a United States of America problem where parents don't listen? Or is this a cultural thing more about humanity? In other words, it's the human race wherever you are. And so I wanted to ask. And so you had all these teenage, dark hair, big, beautiful brown eyes and almost black eyes. And so I asked that, and you know what they did? They still just grinned. They were just grinning because the translator hadn't translated it yet. And so while they're grinning, the translator starts translating it. And the translator says, how many of you just wish your parents would stop and listen to you to understand what you're going through? And I kid you not, while that sentence was being said, the room probably had about 40 16 and 17-year-olds in it. Every smile, just like you cut a switch off, every smile disappeared in that room. And with no hesitation, every arm went straight up. Listen, God gives us the wisdom if we just learn from it. Our children, they really wish we would take the time to listen to them. Your employees really wish you would take the time to listen to them. Your neighbor, your friend, your spouse, members that you share a pew with. It is a sign of respect and love when we take the time to listen to someone. Listening doesn't mean we always agree with everything that's going to be said, but listening does begin the conversation that says, I respect you and I love you. Now again, two phrases, right? What's the last phrase? What about the person that won't listen? It's a folly. It's another word for foolishness. But notice what else it is. And it's a shame. In other words, God is saying if we are involved in relationships and we refuse to listen, it is foolishness and we ought to blush. That's what the idea of shame is in Scripture. We ought to bow our head and be ashamed that we have entered into that relationship with such arrogance. Number 3, do you tell all that you know? Proverbs 12 and 23 begins with a prudent man. Now what's prudence? Well, it's very similar to wisdom, but notice he didn't use the word wisdom. So what's prudence? The idea of prudence is the idea of living life or making decisions with a longer time frame in mind. In other words, if you'll think about it, the times of our life where we usually do or say things that we regret the most, it's usually when we did it on the impulse or we made a decision based on short term. What if you make a decision based on long term? Like, to me, that's one of the powerful aspects of Christian education. You know, you can look and say, I'm going to make a decision about where to spend 4 years. But what if you say, yeah, but what are you going to become during those 4 years? What if your faith is eroded? What's going to happen throughout the rest of your adulthood? Or what kind of friends, what kind of habits are you going to, And so it's neat to be able to look at decisions and say, I want to make this based on long term. And so what does he say about a prudent man? He says a prudent man conceals knowledge. But then he says the heart of fools proclaim foolishness. What does he mean by conceals knowledge? He's not talking here about something that is deceptive, because that wouldn't be wisdom. Here he's talking about the fact that on a regular basis, you and I will learn things that there's no reason for us to ever repeat it. Ever. You and I may see someone do something, and there's no reason to ever state that to anyone. You and I may know something negative about someone, and if we are prudent, we would never repeat that to anyone. But you know, there are others that they're not prudent. And they see someone do something and their mind is almost like the old Rolodexes, and they're thinking, oh boy, the next time I see so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, I can't wait to tell them what I just saw. They're not going to believe this. And that's not prudence. Prudence is to be able to say, I don't ever want to take knowledge and use it to hurt other people. Are you comfortable having many things that you, in a sense, will take to your grave and that you won't share with anyone else? That's what wisdom is all about. But when we don't do that, we have a heart of fools, foolishness that proclaims foolishness. I know this one is not in the book of Proverbs, but I can't help but throw this in. Matthew, the 5th chapter and verse 9, we have one of the Beatitudes. Remember, this is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. It's 3 chapters long. And Jesus, very early in that sermon, begins these Beatitudes. And notice what he says here. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Notice again, the Beatitudes were written like Proverbs. They were written in 2 stanzas, 2 phrases, to help us better understand. One says something, the other either drives it home or repeats it to clarify. And here drives it home to help us understand, well, what if we are peacemakers? Well, you'll be like your Father in heaven. You'll be sons or daughters of God if you do that. So what is a peacemaker? Why is it that people might not like us? What if we don't make peace? Well, let's think about what's the best way to define a peacemaker. I like to just kind of take that word and divide it and transpose it. A peacemaker is one who makes peace. Like, isn't it foolish how some people will look at a person who is just peaceful? They're a peacemaker, and they'll say these words, oh, they're just like that. Yeah, right. A peacemaker is just, or they'll see a family that has peace. And they'll say, yeah, that's just the way that family is. That would be like walking and saying, yeah, you see this piece of furniture? Where'd it come from? Oh, it didn't. It didn't come from anywhere. It's just like that. No. It didn't evolve. Like, it shows design. It shows creation. Like they did what? They made it. There was a furniture maker. And so we know people that have peace in their life. How do they have it? They are peacemakers. You at work, you probably, if you work at a place that's very large, you probably know of a department that they have a lot of peace with each other, and you probably in your workplace know of another department that's not peaceful at all. Well, why? Because one department will have peacemakers in it, and the other one doesn't. It's that simple. Listen, according to God's wisdom, peace is made. It doesn't just happen. It's made. Let me illustrate this way. All right. Here we are in May, about to approach June, and it's wedding time, right? Couple gets married. And when I was in ministry, I did usually two or three premarital sessions every week. We had young people getting married all the time. And so I was doing, a lot of premarital counseling. And I think about like this time of year, and I think, it's not hard to be married this time of year. And I'd always think about those couples, the first holiday season coming up. Wow. You know what they're about to learn? They're about to learn which kind of family they came from. It's going to go something like this. It's going to be mid-November, and it dawns on this newlywed couple. Wow. We can't both be at Mama's house Thanksgiving lunch. Well, what are we going to do? They talk and they say, I don't know, let's just call Mama. And so one of them calls Mom and says, hey, Mom, we're just realizing we probably got a conflict here about Thanksgiving lunch. And so we just want to touch base, like, what could we do? How could we work it out? And she interrupts. She says, well, I tell you what, this house, we've eaten Thanksgiving lunch at 12 noon on Thanksgiving Day, and it's been that way for decades, and it's not about to change. So we'll see you then. Hangs up the phone. And boy, they look at each other shocked. They hadn't seen that side of mom in a while. Definitely not since they've been married. And so tears are welling up a little bit. And they say, what are we going to do? And the other one says, well, you call your mom. The other one calls, says, Mom, we're kind of running into conflicts here. You know, we can't be two houses, Thanksgiving, lunch. We just want to know, like, what can we do? Mom says, honey, it's not about the hour of the day. It's about family getting together. What works for you guys, we'll make it work. We can have a Thanksgiving breakfast. We can celebrate Thanksgiving on Friday. You tell us what works for you, and we'll all get together. We love being together. They end the call, and they look at each other, and they say, I love your mom. Why? You can't help but love peacemakers. Now, peace is made when you say, I'll give up my rights. You know how road rage comes about? Road rage comes about because someone that's in their lane decides, I'm not giving up my right. This lane is my lane, and you're trying to cut me off. At that moment, we can make a split-second decision to do what? We can make peace. Tap the brakes, let them in. Or we could say, I'm not making peace. I'm not giving up my right. This is my lane, and I'm staying here. Go ahead. And just remember, we do not look like the sons and daughters of God when we do that. Look, we could go through a whole lot of these where we just think about all the book of Proverbs has to say. I want to close by us looking at Proverbs. I've stopped going forward here. Can you help me get to the 20th one? The 20th one gets down to, are you a loud person in the morning? That's a good way to make people angry. That's not the whole reason why I'm reading this. If you'll give me a couple minutes, I want to explain to you that drives home the entire lesson, okay? Proverbs 27, the 27th chapter, verse 14 says, he who blesses his friend with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, it will be counted a curse to him. My dad was... He was a farmer. Both sets of my grandparents are farmers. And so I grew up in households that you rose before daylight. And it was that way 6 days a week. And my dad was a morning person. When he put his feet on the floor about 4:30 in the morning, it was the best moment of the day. And he'd come into the room and he would wake me up and he'd be like, son, how you doing? I tell you what we're going to do today. We're going to go out, we're going to fence the backside today, and we're going to be like, Dad, could we get to this like over breakfast? Could you just let me wake up? And he seemed to never understand it. He'd be in the kitchen helping mom get things together. He'd be slamming the doors. You could hear it through the whole house. He'd be putting wood in the wood stove, and he would just bang and clang the doors. And my dad was the best soul on earth. He had such a good heart, but he just didn't get this concept. But you know what's strange? My dad read out of Proverbs every day of his life. I grew up hearing Proverbs just spoken as a daily conversation. Something would have to be done, and he would say, well, Proverbs would tell us to do this, and we'd do it that way. Like, I grew up seeing a man live Proverbs in all of his business and everything that he did as an elder in the church, everything. And so one night, I couldn't believe my eyes. I was reading Proverbs before I went to bed, and there was two things, or one thing that was really strange that night, and that was usually Dad was in bed before any of us. That particular night, he was out somewhere, and I was about to go to sleep, and I read the 27th chapter of Proverbs. I looked at this verse, I thought, how have I missed this? Like, this is awesome. This is Dad's book. And so, that's before the days of answer machines and cell phones and all that. And back when you had the place in the house where you left notes to each other, hey, so-and-so called, whatever. So I went to that place. I got out of bed. I went to that place and I wrote a note. And I said, Dad, before you go to bed tonight, you have to read Proverbs 27 and 14. I circled it, underlined it, highlighted it. Next morning, our house was quiet. The next morning, our house was quiet. Dad would come in and wake me up and he would say, hey son, come on, it's time for breakfast. My dad passed away a year ago. You can go to that farmhouse anytime before that, and in the mornings, it'd be quiet. Here's what I want you to take away from that. It does no good to read Proverbs if you don't plan on making changes in your life. Because I assure you, every day we read Proverbs, we will see wisdom that we have not yet brought into our life. And so I want to encourage you, not only read a proverb every day, but I want to encourage you to read it with a willingness to change something in your life that day of what you read. It's been a pleasure studying with you.